Hello and welcome to third ASLI Annual Senior Care Conclave, a joint initiative of ASLI and Unmukh Senior Hub. While growing up, I was told you could choose to do social service and make a difference to your community, or you could do a job or a business and make money. There was always a strong perception that these two options were mutually exclusive. After joining ASLI, I was pleasantly surprised to see that there was actually an industry where you could make a difference to your community and still be a profitable venture. As the senior care ecosystem evolves, it is necessary to create value-based care. Models of innovative partnership are being explored by organizations to focus on outcomes, moving away from a product-based approach to a more holistic one, leveraging expertise and emerging technologies. This brings us to our next session, leveraging strategic partnerships in the senior care ecosystem. Now, I would like to introduce the moderator of this session, Dr. Rana Mehta, Partner Healthcare Leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers. We also have Ms. Pavithra Gangadharan, Founder, Kshetra Assisted Living, Mr. Pritish Gupta, CEO and CBO, Dozee, and Mr. Saumyajit Roy, CEO, Emoha. Dr. Mehta, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bani. And as you rightly said, we're living in a time while I think in India, we've always spoken about how young a country we are. But if you look at the absolute numbers, by 2030, you'll have over 250 million people over the age of 65. So that in absolute terms is something we need to reckon for. So I think while we look at the demographic dividend as it plays out with this young population, I'm sure that if we do not take care of the elderly, this would wither away. Also, I think as you look at the senior citizens, I think it's a very heterogeneous group. Their needs are very, very different in India. Their medical needs, non-medical needs, their socialization needs. And the settings in which these needs are actually done are also very different. Majority at home, but also into institutions of varied natures, providing different facilities. They also need support for daily living, mobility, and very difficult for a single provider to do it. So I think, like you rightly said, the component of how do you look at strategic partnerships to bring it. It has to be more like a platform. And, the approach to caring for senior citizens is not a pipeline approach where, you build a product or a service. It has to be much more varied than that. And move away from a product-based approach to where you look at the various facets and actually look at technology as one of the biggest enablers. We've also seen, and this was very evident during the COVID, the fragility of both the private and public healthcare systems. So there are a lack of resources. So if we want to build a new ecosystem and a new paradigm, it would require a different approach because we know that it's not that we're going to have the capital, we're going to have the medical resources, we're going to have to actually provide for that care because we're not at stage. So I think it requires a very innovative approach. So a person, who now at 65, paid taxes all his life, what does he get back in return is something, when he looks back and says, and he has to pay taxes till he's alive. So where is that equation and how, as a country can we make sure, because I think one of the things you judge a country is how well you treat your elderly. So with that, let me begin. I have a very distinguished panel, and I'm, when I connected, I was really enamored to see, some of the work they've been doing is really path-breaking. So I'll begin with you, Swamiji. So you've had a long stint in this. You started off when, most people didn't know what senior living or assisted living was about. So tell us about, the journey which got you to build Emoha, and, what were some of those issues which came along, which, both our panelists as well as the audience would find very useful as they build this story for themselves.
Thank you, Dr. Rana. Very warm welcome to all participants on this, very, very important session. My name is Saumyajit. I am the co-founder and CEO of Emoha, and as Dr. Rana was saying, my journey, although it started about 10, 12 years back when, I was looking after the national practice of Jones Lang LaSalle for looking after senior living related studies across the country. As a consultant, I, happened to travel across the country and do multiple studies, more than about 40, 45 studies across the country, interacting with elders from literally from, up Amritsar to Coimbatore to Gandhinagar, and used to constantly hear stories of elders, wanting better quality of life and not being happy with where they were, kind of staying. One thing which used to always, which I used to always see is that elders always would like to have better emergency solutions, better solutions for taking care of their health and safety and so on. And while a significant percentage of people would want to move into senior living facilities, a large percentage of them would want to stay in their own home. So as moving from JLL, when I went and become part of the team at Antara Senior Living, a lot of very, very good work got done at Antara in terms of creating a very beautiful senior living facility. And it still used to bother me that a lot of people would still want to be at home and enjoy the best, services and facilities for elders. And that's how Emoha started 2 years back, to create an opportunity for elders to stay at home wherever they are, and enjoy, a community feeling where, whether it is paramedics, whether it is emergency responders, whether it is doctors, essentially all services and community context can be available, streamed right into their own home. And I have seen my own parents, my in-laws, and family members who are elders go through the same challenge, which has over the years, inspired me and connected me to build the story in such a way that elders can decide to stay wherever they are. But wherever they are, they should be able to stay safe and secure, because in a country like ours, the institutional infrastructure is not there, for people to stay in their own home and stay safe. So that really has prompted, Emoha to take its own place and be able to serve the community for elders, Dr. Anna.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is quite inspiring. Pavithra, I'll come next to you. I think yours was a very different approach, where you looked at this problem, you saw it, and then you actually started building a brick and mortar, a very different model. So from what were some of those learnings as you go ahead, as you've built this institution?
So for me, I come from a family business that has been in geriatric care since 1994. So there's been a lot of learning just by watching my parents having set up that structure. But I was originally handling the home care service that we were providing in Hyderabad to the elderly in their homes. And somehow my calling was more in the institutional space. So in 2013, we set up the first assisted living, which is Kshetra. And it was a particularly hard sell. I think definitely 8 years ago, people were averse to the concept of having their parents go and stay in another home. It seemed something that only destitutes and orphans would consider, and that too for payment. I mean, that was even more blasphemous. So the first 2 years, it took all the conviction we had to kind of pull through. But we're in our 8th year now, and we were running 2 centers. We've got 80 rooms, all single occupancy rooms, and touch wood, I think the market is it's opened up. People are much more receptive to it. I think they're acknowledging that while we acknowledge that preference to stay at home is always the first for anybody, and we acknowledge that institutional care would be the very last ditch effort. It is something that you would only consider after having explored every other option. I think families are also now acknowledging the fact that there are some things that they're not able to do on the home front, logistically or emotionally, physically, it's not possible. And that's when they're coming to us. And whether it's short stay or long stay, I think people are they're warming up to this concept. Even though it'll always be a very small percentage, much like it is worldwide, there is still a need for it. So today we are running 2 units, and we specialize in dementia care. So almost 90% of the people staying with us are living with some form of Alzheimer's or dementia. And just last year, we managed to get ourselves an ISO certification. So we've now managed to standardize the services that we're providing across the units, and that is something that is something we're proud of, because it kind of aligns with the vision of being a service provider, an institutional service provider that wants to be affordable. So we've never been sprawling acres and 5-star. We are very affordable. We want the middle class to be able to reach out to us. So while we want to remain affordable, the ISO has enabled us to kind of ensure that there is a certain level of quality that we can assure. We can reassure families that, you know, you're not just dumping them with us and pushing off. So that's where we're at. As far as the larger organization is concerned, under the parent body of Heritage, we also offer home care, and we have an independent living facility and a skilled nursing facility, all of which operate in Hyderabad, all of which we operate only on a monthly rental basis. So in our own way, we're trying to offer a continuum of care to the elderly, but our focus is always on the institutional setup, the brick and mortar setup.
No, thanks. I think that's because, you know, till quite a, when I was in medical college, you know, there's very little you could do about dementia. There were no protocols. Most people, even the clinicians, actually struggled. You know, once you made a diagnosis, what next? So I think that's a very important point, rather than, you know, brush it away and say this doesn't exist. And the problem's only with a large aging population going to get worse. So we need to make sure, you know, what component needs to get institutional care and what can you still facilitate at home. Yeah. Pratish, I think one of the things which really fascinates me is the name of your thing, Dozee. So how did Dozee begin, and, you know, how did you come up with a name, and you know, what was the inspiration for that?
Right. First of all, thanks a lot for having me, and you know, good to be with Swamiji and Pavithra and, you know, Dr. Rana here. So actually, you know, our great insight was something similar to what Swamiji mentioned, that you know, people want to be taken care of in their home setting itself, right? And you know, we were constantly worried about our parents ourselves, right? You know, who were living away from us, and, you know, we had no visibility of how they are doing, right? Such a basic need, but still no visibility of it. And, you know, whenever you would call a parents, you know, they will always say ki haan sab badhiya hai, right? That's the typical answer that you would get. So we were always, you know, constantly worried about it. And you know, we thought of building something that can provide care continuum in the home setting itself, to you know, to elders, to ourselves. And we thought that, you know, what is that time as an individual that you would be, you know, more stable, and you know, you can sort of monitor the health of the person, right? And we found out that sleep is the time, right, when, you know, everybody for sure, you know, will spend minimum 6 to sort of 10 hours every day, right? And a lot of things really happen in your sleep actually, right? Unless the traditional belief that, you know, you just shut off and nothing happens in with your body, right? Actually, all the, you know, repair work, everything, you know, all your body vitals change during the sleep, right? And so we started building a device which can track sleep, right? And hence the name Dozee, because that is very close to doze, which means sleep, right? So we started building a sleep monitor. As we moved ahead, you know, we found out that we can actually be, you know, much more accurate, and, you know, we kept building on it. And in fact, in between, we had a very interesting eureka moment ourselves. Um, so, you know, one day when we were out for a tea, our dog, you know, who used to just you know, eat anything in front of him, right? He was just 6 months old. So to protect that sheet, so it's Dozee is a thin sheet which goes below the mattress, right? At that time, we were above the mattress, right? So to protect the sheet from him, we kept it under the mattress, right? And when we came back, we found him to be sleeping on the bed, and you know, we could get some health signals. We could get heartbeat signal, and, you know, inhale exhale signal, and that is how we actually went under the mattress, right? And so, you know, here we are now, having built you know, this patented contactless health monitor, which, you know, without any intervention or without any you know, daily manual work, it tracks your heartbeat, respiration, blood pressure, right, and so on, right, and provides that information remotely to the doctors and to your loved ones, right, so that everybody can know what's happening. And at the same time, the AI um, predicts early on if there's any case of deterioration, right? So what started up as a sleep monitor went underneath the mattress and became a health monitor, which is being used by 50 plus hospitals and thousands of individuals at home.
Very interesting, right? I love the Eureka movement because I mean it's so much more convenient under and so much more protected from that perspective. And I think technology is the easiest because it's much more ubiquitous, much easier to propagate from there. Saumyajit, I'll come back to you. And, I think one of the things in India, when we talk about the elderly, we just think about the healthcare part, right? Everything comes to, now assuming that, they say, 70s is the new 60s and 80s is the new 70s. And, the way everything's being pushed, people are much more healthier. In fact, the fastest growing demographic in the US is people above 85. So going ahead, I think there are many more things which constitute elderly care and not only healthcare. So how do you look at it from both a personal perspective and a company perspective?
No, I think we are all sitting in a time when COVID, I keep saying this, that the year 2020 is pretty much the year of the elder. And while elders across the world have obviously suffered the most during this period, not just because of COVID, but because of the restrictions that COVID has placed on the society. I think what one has come out very clearly is the effect of loneliness and isolation that happens when elders stay in their own home without, support systems and so on. Almost everybody on, today this conference is a virtual conference. We are all sitting from our respective office, homes, wherever. And I think everyone today has experienced, to live the life of an elder by staying at home for, months at end. I don't think ever, and Pavithra would agree in terms of how an elder, when he goes into a dementia care facility or otherwise, when the person doesn't kind of step out of home, or an elder who, and we used to have even pre-COVID times, a lot of our elderly, kind of family members, kind of would stay in their own home for long and no visits are happening. Children are in a different country or in a different city. There is some amount of social isolation that happens, and that is the beginning of a journey of more healthcare challenges and issues, whether it is depression, whether it is, other lifestyle disorders, healthcare issues, arthritis, and so on and so forth. Over the world, it has been more than adequately established that loneliness is the biggest pandemic in the world, much larger than COVID. We all have seen, a vaccine, vaccines coming in the form of COVID, but I don't think there is a vaccine that is out there for, fixing loneliness. And, while we will be able to solve, hopefully COVID and all its variants, I think the larger challenge, and Dr. Murthy, Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's the ex-US Surgeon General in the United States, had written a book on loneliness, and it comes out very, very clearly that if you are able to solve for social engagement, if you are able to solve for elderly engagement, and take care of the kind of needs that elders have for making them more connected, more amongst friendly people, it automatically takes care of a lot of other issues, whether it is in the form of healthcare, emergency, and so on. So when we started creating Emoha, we obviously had many unique features. We were the first 911 emergency care system evolved with paramedics and defense force people in the city. We also had more than 500 doctors on the system. But besides the fact that emergency and health was so active in the system, we also decided to make engagement the central pillar. And by that definition, what I mean is that elders across the country, from Agra to Chennai to Jalandhar to Chandigarh and Delhi, every day for 3 times a day are actually connecting with each other virtually on Zoom sessions like this, and are able to celebrate different types of events and activities as a joint family, as a virtual family. And this is really addressing a very, very deep, elderly issue, which is around loneliness. So for our thought process, I feel that when we are able to solve the social disconnect of an elder and are able to build and stitch these elements together, the ability for us to make the life of an elder better is far more powerful. So we took that paradigm. We feel that, healthcare, elder care is not just healthcare. Healthcare is a very important part of it, but there is life far beyond healthcare. And when we are able to make an elder's life happy, more engaged, an elder can contribute into so many things in life. If we can give energy and vitality to those elements, when elders feel that they are wanted and they are relevant and they can teach, they can adopt a school, they can, give guidance to startups. That is a far better way of making elder care relevant than just look at ways in which how to fix an elder's health. So we are taking a more holistic, multi-pronged view to this, where it is built around the 5 pillars of health, emergency, safety, support, and convenience, so that all these pillars gets addressed, but the elders stay happy in their own home. And we'll find friends. We'll find people who, 20 years from now, when I am 63, I'm sure I'll find friends who are similar to myself, and I would like to stay in touch with them, irrespective of wherever I am staying. That's the model that we took, Dr. Mehta.
Very interesting, and I think, like you rightly said, loneliness is a much bigger problem, and which no healthcare system either diagnoses or addresses at all, right?
Yeah.
So I think
and just wanted to kind of just wanted to give one very, very, one of our elders who stays in Pune, and just before COVID, about 2 months before COVID, lost his son. And this is somebody who's about 75 years old, lost his son, a very successful guy in New York. And the other day, one of our elders who stays in Delhi also lost his son from a liver transplant case. The amount of happiness that all of us got when we connected both these elders, both staying alone, both have lost their spouse, both 175, the other 77. And for us, success was connecting both of them and ensuring they become best of friends. So the social engineering of getting people who, by social definition, are similar in nature, and getting them to take care of each other, I think, brings a lot of opportunities in the future for elders who can take care of each other, and younger elders being able to take care of older elders. And that's the model which I think, has a very, very sustainable long-term future.
No, I think a wonderful example, because something like that, I'm sure none of the institutions in India are either looking at addressing or capable of addressing. Great. Pavithra, I think one of the things with having a brick and mortar presence is obviously that you're limited to your micro markets, and expansion becomes a challenge. So you really need to look at partnerships. How do you take your model, which is very successful, where you are well honed, the protocols, but how do you? It's still subscale. So how do you replicate that? So how do you look at partnerships to catalyze that growth?
That's a good question. It's one that we've been asking ourselves for the last year now. So for us, our growth has been very slow, but I also think that that can be attributed to our choice, because we have always decided to grow organically. So we like to build our own facilities. We like to design them to be senior friendly, and those have been certain preferences that we've had. But now there are a lot of other, real estate developers who are coming into this space, and they are building spaces that are meant for seniors. So definitely we've been, I'm thinking about how can we partner with such organizations that have the infrastructure set up, when we can bring in the service component of it. Our growth is limited for lack of funds, for the amount of time that it takes to set up a facility, the physical structure of it. And geographically also we are extremely challenged. But in terms of partnerships, while one way of doing it would be to kind of work with somebody who's already got that infrastructure set up, I think one major consideration would be to find like-minded partners. So I always think that we are in senior care, we are in the private sector, and somewhere we're caught between a rock and a hard place, because we are expected to be cheap, we're expected to be charity. There is an aversion to thinking that senior care service providers are charging money. So and then if you look at people who are typical in real estate, that is a completely pure for-profit model. So it's important for us to look at finding partners who are both interested in the mission, the actual the cause of reaching out to these elderly, and also looking at having the service be self-sustainable, if not all that lucrative, because there is a compromise in terms of the financial outcome, especially for an organization like us that is so insistent on being affordable to the average middle class family.
Right. Also, just to carry on that, the real estate, they've been in this for over a decade and a half, but there's been very limited success. Why do you think, they've only had limited success?
Another good question. I don't think anyone really has an answer for that. But I think somewhere the facilities which are kind of coming up exclusively for the seniors are finding it very difficult. Probably the ones that are kind of developing the cohabitation spaces are doing better. And I also think this is something that's very specific to the geography of where these projects are coming up. So in places like Hyderabad, these projects haven't really picked up very well. I think people are more happy to invest in land and then just pay monthly rentals for the services that they're rendering for their parents. So I think it's also a mindset that's determined by the culture of the place that these projects are coming up in. They're definitely they're good projects. I'm sure that there is huge need, and I'm sure that there'll be many takers now, especially since COVID has really opened up this. It has made people explore this option with a much more open mind than they were before. We'll have to see how it kind of pans out. But in our experience, I think there is enough of a market for people who are interested in putting their money into real estate, and just the same amount of people who are looking at just having a monthly kind of payment coming into this kind of service.
Right. Saumyajit, would you like to add on to that? Why this response on the real estate has been much more tepid compared to other countries?
No, I think the way I see it is that, and it's early days. Back in 2008-9, when I had first written the national white paper on senior living, you're right that at point of time, old age home was the only normal, and it took about 8 to 10 years for people to appreciate that there is something called senior living. I think we are kind of hitting a 3.0, where the 1.0 was people just kind of curious about the sector. 2.0 is where a lot of people have now got into senior living, understand that this is an interesting space. I think last 5-7 years, no real estate players are there who kind of are not aware of this space. But the 3.0 space is now starting, where I would almost say that kudos to Pavithra, kudos to Neha at Epoch, kudos to many assisted living, memory care, detailed operators who frankly are a very fantastic value proposition. Hotels, for that matter, are not able to kind of manage the kind of yields that that an assisted living player can give. The unique thing about an assisted living player is that you can give 100% occupancy at a much larger yield compared to any other player. And I think the real estate segments and the real estate partners will definitely, especially in this time where there is, there is money. It's not like money is not there, but that money is not going to the traditional real estate sectors, but it will actually be beneficial to people like Pavithra who want to expand. So I actually feel that the opportunity will now start to show up as as the pandemic starts to kind of go to the new normal, because these facilities are able to give much better returns compared to other alternate asset class like hospitality assets and so on. So they just have to see a few more. I don't think we have 30 or 40 or 50 chain assisted living examples in the country yet. But around the same time next year, we will certainly look at more assisted living facilities with 10, 15, 20 assets, which are stabilized assets. And when that happens, capital will find its way to this sector. I'm bullish about it.
Yeah.
I
so
feel
I think
very
the quest for the correct business model to come in, right? And you're saying all the building blocks for that are in place.
The hotel industry has gone through this 15 years back. The school industry has gone through this 12, 15 years back. Hospitals, as you know, Dr. Mehta has gone through this in terms of PropCo, OpCo, when, between from Religare, Fortis times to now, where operating assets and property assets were separated and so on. So I see the assisted living market going that direction as well, while it coexists with the home players like ourselves. So I see the growth happening on both the axes.
Right, thank you. Uh, Pritish, I think one of the biggest things, and I was going through a couple of reports on senior living. I think is that giving access to technology, because anything else becomes most difficult. So one is training the elderly in the use of technology and making technology ubiquitous across them, not only for them but also for the caregiver. And those are objectives which both the Holland and even the Japanese government, I think most of the components where they look at is how can we use technology, because that's much easier. And I think in India also we have the same problem. We will never have the geographical resources from a healthcare point of view. The financial resources are also limited. Most of senior living does not get covered under any scheme or insurance, unlike the US. And so we'll have to have a technological access. So beyond what you're doing, how do you see this paradigm on a technological access and grow in the next 5 years?
Right. No, so I think you know the very fact that we are having such conversations around elder care, right? And COVID has really brought that to the forefront specifically, right? I think this conversation will lead more and more technologies and more entrepreneurs jumping into this space, right, and solving for the very basic need of elderly challenges, right? We were lucky. I would say that, yeah, we were lucky that we built first for the elderlies, because we knew that if we could solve the challenges of the elderlies, we can solve the challenges for anybody in the world, right? Because if you can, in the adoption curve, solve for the most laggards of the people, right, then upwards in that stream you can solve for anybody, right? So that was our thought process. And I think people like Saumyajit and Pavithra, right, jumping into this most difficult space is a testament of the fact that whether it's technology or non-technology solution, right, if people understand that this is a problem statement to be solved for, they will find one or the other ways to solve it, right? And I across the space I see that people are doing wonderful job in solving this issue, right? So be it utilizing digitizing the elders themselves, right, or reaching out to them, let's say through WhatsApp, or teaching them how to use a mobile at the first place, right? Because if the issue is that with elders specifically, there's this hitch, or there is this barrier that needs to be crossed. Once that barrier is crossed, then you see mass adoption, right? And but I think WhatsApp example is the best again testament of this, right? Once my parents, let's say, got to know about it, or the neighbors' parents got to know about it, that there was a widespread adoption of it. That's similar is the case with, let's say, Facebook, right? So we will see more and more adoption happening with elders. It's just a matter of time, another half a decade, right, when some of these technologies will become much more mainstream, and you'll see a lot of elders participating in it.
Yeah. Pritish, one of the things in India we see is that the device adoption is very low, right? Most elders don't have any devices which they can monitor and sell. People with dementia don't have pill boxes which make sure that you can take the correct pill. Now, given that the cost of most of these has come down, and you can actually geographically ring fence people to see that someone with Alzheimer's has gone back home, and not sitting in a park at night, even though there's no caregiver. Now this has become the mainstream in most of the Western countries, and it's not that it comes at a very high cost, but it's still not seen in India. Why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, I think there are 2-3 facets to it. One is, in India, there's a cultural nuance of ignorance is bliss, right? From the very beginning, we are told that, the lesser we know, especially when it comes to health, the better it is, right? So, if you tell your parents to, let's say, go get a annual checkup done, right? It's very likely that they would say that, no, let's not do it, right? So, in India, there's this cultural nuance where, people themselves don't want to know, let's say, the status of their health, right? That's one big difference between India and the Western countries, right? So culturally, we're not ready for it. The second reason, we have seen again and again is, India is, it's a market which is driven by out-of-pocket expenses, right? As compared to Western countries where, insurance comes in and pitches in, by taking up some of these costs, right? So when it's out-of-pocket expenses, right, people want to maximize on some of their immediate needs, right? And not invest so much in preventive or, things which are about to come, right? That is why insurance industry has struggled, all throughout the century, right? Healthcare adoption in India is, always to the last moment. Until you get a heart attack, you don't actually go to a hospital, right? Or you don't actually see a doctor, right? Annual checkups, right? Is done very, very less in India, right? As compared to in the West, right? Where there's a deep penetration because insurance, will compensate you if you actually take up some of these, steps. And so that's again a very big difference between how India and the Western markets have done. And the third difference, we have seen is that, again, because of all of these first two factors, people tend to rely a lot on what the doctors have to say, right? Self-care as a segment has never come up in India, right? If your doctor say that this has to be done, then you will blindly do it, right? So there is a lot of adoption curve challenge which needs to be solved at the doctor end as well, right? Luckily, it's unfortunate to say this. Luckily, with COVID, all these three factors have, seen a huge jump, right? Something like as basic as telemedicine, right, which is one of the, let's say, technological innovations in this space, right, has seen such a massive jump, right, because of, let's say COVID, right? So I think all these three challenges will now start, getting taking a back seat, and you'll see a lot more adoption of devices, telemedicine, e-pharma, etc. kind of services.
No, exactly, because if you look at the US, a lot in the elderly space is do it yourself, the DIY medicine, which they call, because there's a lot you can do yourself at home, so including companies where, when you do physiotherapy, you pretty much do it yourself. But the monitor tells the coach at the end, your mobility of your joint is now 30 degrees. You worked for a week, it's become 40 degrees. If it's not improving, she'll come back and tell you. So I think the technology exists, but obviously the adoption is slow. Let me come back to all the panelists again, because I think while and Pritish, what you said is the COVID probably made things happen which would have happened in 5 years, in about 5 months. But again, it's still a very subscale sector, right? It's on the periphery. It's not built the ecosystem where in serious investors are coming in. One of the growth is always follow the investors, right? So if you look at in COVID, how did 2020 go? It depends on who you were, right? So if you were Jeff Bezos, you say it's probably the best year for Amazon ever, right? The same goes for Microsoft. And what did Netflix did? It basically monetized your boredom. So as long as you don't monetize, because telemedicine's been a technology for 50 years, it's a technology in search of a business model. So Saumyajit, how would you think the ecosystem will come to actually make the business models work together seamlessly? Because if that doesn't happen, we'd be waiting the next 20 years and we say, yeah, this is there, but there's no player of scale.
No, I see. I clearly see that this is not an isolated problem. I think, like for example, let me talk about Emoha. Where we operate, we obviously have our own elder app. We have technology solutions. We have sensors in the elder's home. Even have many of our homes where Pritish's Dozee systems have been implanted. We are hardware agnostic. There is elders who need certain solutions are implanted. But early on, we realized that as a platform where other solutions can be integrated with our offering, it's very important that we bring the best to the center of the world, which is the elder. So whether it is medical devices, whether it is sensor devices, or safety devices, which is the hardware part of the world, what happens if something goes wrong is a question that we need to answer. And unless, therefore, the last mile is protected, in a senior living facility, the last mile is manned by people who come from the facility. Whether it's an assisted living facility, CCRC, IL, AL, MC, But when it comes to the neighborhood, which is what 99 point, pretty much 99.8% of India's elders are going to stay, there is no last mile. There is no last mile, forget geriatrics. There is nobody who the elder can. We have so many cases, more than 90 lives have been saved in the last, 12 months. And if our paramedics would not have reached, the person would most probably have passed away. And this is a person who's hit his head after a fall and kind of not been able to recover because there's a middle of the night emergency that has happened. So what I'm trying to say is that connecting the dots between hardware providers, the last mile entry, the hospital, the police systems, the chemist, the laboratories, the doctor systems, telemedicine systems. Most of the time what we do is we end up connecting the dots between different kinds of players and partners so that it is offered to the elder at the center of the world, and not just to the elder but also to the children who are staying in different parts of the world. So that partnership is extremely important. We still don't have very, very good emergency management systems in the country. So all the time we are connecting in different parts of the country, and because we are working in more than 80 cities and towns, every city and town has their own unique way of how emergencies are managed, their own ambulance systems, their own last mile responder systems, and so on. So I see a future where, as an elder care company representing the elder, the more and more partnerships get stitched, one outside of, let's say, Asli members, but also within Asli members. Dozee and Emoha work together. So seniority and Emoha work together. So how we are able to work together also defines joint offerings that can be offered to the common, common customer, which is the elder. So I actually see a lot of opportunity where, let's say, very near to where Pavithra operates in Hyderabad, if we have elders who need memory care, there is no reason for me to be able to serve memory care in Hyderabad near to that location, but I'm sure she would be able to help our elders in a time of need. So it's these kind of partnerships and cross opportunities which I think is very, very powerful as we move forward.
Exactly, because I think, like you rightly said, we need to build a very strong platform where every company can come in. India is a huge country, right? So you're not likely to have one player. And also, it's not the DNA of one player to serve all the needs of the elder.
Absolutely.
So Pavithra, like you said, one is that some of the people think elderly, whatever you provide to elders should not be charged for. But unless there is a pressing business model, there is going to be no viability, no scalability, no growth, right? It's all going to be. How do you think that the business model will come in?
So we are only talking about the middle and upper middle class. I think in this conversation, we're pretty much neglecting 95% of India's aging population that's pretty much living without resources but in need of help. I'd like to see at some point insurance and government support covering assisted living and dementia care like they do in all other countries in the West. I think that is something that the conversation seems to have started, but I'm sure it'll take some time to pan out. That is one way. As of now, it is only the families that are able to provide for it, and which is one of the reasons why for us we've always been very keen on being affordable, because let's admit it, this might be a bit of a controversial statement to make, but not everybody is willing to spend so much money on their parents or their grandparents. I think we're open to spending money on our kids, but there is always a resistance to spending money on parents. So if what I see happening is that there'll be more players that are coming in that are able to offer services which they're able to provide a reasonable quality of life, probably more like us, not giving a 5-star luxurious lifestyle, but giving a decent quality of life, a decent standard of living, and focus more on the service and the care aspects of it. Then we'll see more takers for it. As of now, there are still quite a number of good players, but a lot of them are prohibitively expensive. So they're out of reach for most families, and particularly if you consider dementia care, the number of calls that we get from families that we are unable to service simply because we're above their price point is almost heartbreaking. I mean, what is a guy to do when he's surviving on a parsley salary and he has to go to work and he can't afford home care and he can't afford institutional care? So hopefully we'll see more saviors coming into the space who are able to find a balance between the mission and their need for financial sustainability. And that's what I see happening over the next few years until we're able to get some kind of funding or insurance support for that.
Yeah, because I think, we have few resources and you need to channelize them properly because the population is going to grow, whether we address it or not, in a couple of years, we will have, enough people like the population elderly will be like the population of Greater Europe. And it'll be a challenge. It'll also be a roadblock to our GDP over a period of time because, you need to pay for it. You need to look after. I mean, they've been very sincere in, working hard, paying the taxes and bringing it. But the reverse cycle of, what as a society do we owe to them? Pritish, if you were to sort of crystal gaze and look forward, especially from a technology point of view, how would you see this? Because of COVID, there've been a lot of myths which have been broken. But what would, say, Utopia look from a technology perspective in 5 years' time?
I think Utopia would look like an integrated solution with different players bringing their own expertise, coming together and as Saumyajit mentioned, keeping the elder or the individual in the center, right? Providing those things, all of those things to them, right? And I think the Utopia would look a lot like care at home. Care at home in a sense that people are in the place of their comfort and they have, let's say the, lack of, maybe I'm taking it a bit further away, but like a robot, taking care of them, right? Not a robot in this case, but let's say a Dozee in this case, right? Or telemedicine, taking care of them, or, some kind of e-pharmacy taking care of them, right? So I think that is going to happen. And, that Utopia is, I believe, not that far away because, now the government itself has jumped into this whole scenario through NDHM, right? And they have said that, let's bring all of these players together, right? So I believe that Utopia is going to be about providing accessible, affordable, preventive healthcare to millions and millions of people, with the help of technology and different service providers.
No, that's great. I mean, at least I think from a technological, there's a lot of hope because that's the access to care both for elderly and even the population, which can really actually happen because the rest is difficult given that we have limited resources as a country and they are diverted elsewhere given the priorities.
I'll actually give a very interesting example here, Mr.
Sure.
If you'll allow me actually. So, India, so in US, if you see, credit cards and debit cards, came in, right? In India and China, that never happened, right? India skipped that generation. From cash, we directly went into the UPI generation, right? The mobile payment generation, right? And India has now leapfrogged into the whole financial accessibility sphere, right? Same has happened with telecom as well, right? And because of which, we see a lot of entrepreneurs now jumping into, different spaces of startups, digitization of different services, etc., right? I believe that is going to happen. That's already happening with education, right? That change, and that is now going to happen in the next 5 years with healthcare, right? Where India is going to leapfrog with the help of technology and with different service providers, right? Because the whole UPI-fication in healthcare is underway, and you'll have a massive infrastructure built in, which will be best in class, especially in India, right? And the whole question of accessibility and affordability will be now solved for in the next half a decade.
No, exactly. And I just like the word that you used, leapfrog. Pavithra, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just want to tell Pritish, if you do actually come up with a robot, please send a couple our way because we're having a hell of a time with trained manpower. I think that will be a really wonderful solution.
No, exactly. And, the robots don't go on strike. They don't fight with each other. So there are a lot of advantages, Though, humans as a species, we've been one of the most successful species on Earth because we collaborate with each other. But, we'll go into that at a later time. Bunny, do we have any questions which have been asked, or should we
Yes,
conclude?
there's in fact one question which has been put on the, for the panelists, which has come from Mr. Andrew Lapunt, which is that what are the things that can be done to discourage the development of a dependency culture among seniors and promote the concept of self-care and healthy aging both in home situations and residential settings. So that's an open question to all.
Saumyajit, would you like to give it a first stab?
Yeah, so I think Andrew has brought out a very interesting element, and just to share some statistics that India has about 40 million elders in urban areas. 10 million of them easily are people in the early part of the retirement cycle. We have a 96-year-old, an Emoha member, who was an avid painter. There is no reason why, and I recently, an 88-year-old did a song performance which blew me off. But I would still say that of the 40 million elders who are in urban areas, even if I were to look at, a 20% of them, 25%, 10 million of them who are potentially active, and multiply that by 50, we have 50 million man years of experience lying unutilized in this country. Hold that number again, guys. 50 million man years of experience. If you can imagine your parents, would you agree that your parents are worthwhile? Would you agree that your parents have the right experience? If any of you feel that your parents don't have the right experience, I have a bigger question mark. But if your parents have the right experience, Pavitra's dad is a rock star. The kind of experience that our elders have is so much, we utilize nothing of it, literally nothing. So if you look at 50 into 40, almost like 2500 million man years of experience lying unutilized, that is where I feel there is an opportunity where we can even harness 5% of that, make them more, give them the kind of recognition platform that they can enjoy life better, and stitch a ecosystem around them where they can be more safe and secure. Then there is no problem. Then they can stay at home, do whatever they want to do. We can stitch the dots and connects between them. And as the market becomes more and more mature, I see next year, by the time this conference happens again, hopefully more money would have flown into this sector so that more entrepreneurs in this segment can go to the next level. And as every entrepreneur, I have seen this happening over the last 12 years now, that everybody is becoming more and more better in what they do. And within the Asli family, we always collaborate. So overall, the industry will become better and better, so that people can collaborate and have better services being streamed in to an elder's home. But it's very important to change the ageism. I think our biggest challenge I personally continue to face is that we think of elders as only consumers. I think that is the one direction that we really need to change. We should not look at an elder just as a person whose kidney is up for change, or the knee is up for change. There is far more to an elder than just healthcare. And therefore, if we can harness the remaining part and give them a better relevance, a better independence, better purpose in life, and serve that requirement, keep them in the center of our world and serve them, automatically their health and their care becomes better. So in my world, I see harnessing the power of elders and making them the center of our world in a nation, the priority. I see that happening.
I really like the thing, 50 million man years of experience, and here we're trying to reinvent the wheel, get that because one of the articles I recently read is that while we think of startups, the most successful startups are people above 55 who start, or people above 60 who actually retire and then they do a startup, and they're the ones who become unicorn in 5 years rather than 2 decades.
Correct. And in the Japanese concept, the older person and the youngster have always partnered together. So the power of having the 350 million youngsters and the 100 million youngsters on a ratio of 1:4 actually solves the problem. So, 3 youngsters tied up with 1 elder can give relevance to both in the future.
No, I think gives us a lot of optimism from what we can do as a nation, because while the resources are scarce, like we keep saying, but I think you brought out that we have so much of resources, so much of knowledge, so much of experience, which we're just not able to harness. It's great to look at, teaching people, but people who've been taught, they're being suboptimally utilized. Anyone would like to add on, or Bani, should we conclude?
Any last concluding comments, or otherwise, we could wrap up because.
Sure. So I'll. Pavithra.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Pavithra.
I'd like to just add a small point on Ms. Lavan's question. So we see this dependency a lot, especially in the institutional front. In the home care front, you can justify it a little bit because the elderly person is staying alone, and in the context of having caregivers. This. But in the institutional front, we try to get our residents to remain independent. That is always our effort. So we encourage them to make their own beds, and we encourage them to fold their own clothes. And we always find that this the dependency is kind of encouraged by the family members, which is the consumer is the resident, but the customer, the person who's paying you, is the son or the daughter or relative. And the way they promote this dependency is by saying, it's for two things. One is they're guilty. They feel a lot of guilt because it is against our culture to have somebody stay in a home. So they want to ensure that, they allay that guilt by having all comforts available to their parents and not allow them to lift a finger. But also I think it's kind of extracting your money's worth. So I'm paying you for this and I don't want you to make my parents do their work. So somewhere it is a mindset, because the middle class, the paying guys in India, they used to having help around the house and they used to depending a lot on them, and they want that to kind of continue. So somewhere we're not able to get out of that mindset where we want to be able to fend for ourselves. I think that will change over the next few generations, because by the time I'm old enough, I'm sure there won't be a caregiver in sight. So I kind of have to survive on my own. But I don't see this changing anytime soon. Although this dependency might not exist in the lower economic segments, I think it's something that's very much promoted and encouraged in the middle class and higher segments.
Right. No, I think the one of the things is obviously everything technology, resources, but it is also a cultural mind shift, right? And it took a very long time before today. Technology is people trust more technology than they trust people, but that took a long time to happen. Also, I think, like you said, technology democratizes everything, right? It's not that, it gives you preference when you stand in front of the ATM, whether, you're a laborer or, you're a top official, it treats you in the same way. So I think it becomes more acceptable. It breeds a lot of trust as you go ahead. And I think one of the components of this new ecosystem has to be trust, because we saw last year in the COVID, there was a lot of mistrust, in society between public, private, government, migrants. So I think you need to build trust, especially where you're going to impact lives of people, where there is a lot of fragility. I think, just to conclude, I think this has been an excellent panel. I learned a lot from my co-panelists, because I was not so aware of the depth and knowledge of, how this is being. But I think it's very important because, as in 2050, 1 out of every 5 Indians will be above the age of 65. And, that's not very long time. So with such a large population, if we don't put those building blocks in now and don't build a coherent ecosystem which can sustain this, I think it would be detrimental. It's something which I think we not only owe it to our elderly, but we owe it to the new generation, because the generation yet to be born would be having a huge burden if we don't address this. So thank you for taking the time out. I must thank my panelists. I must thank all the people who took the time out to listen to this. And thank you for being a wonderful virtual audience. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Thank you so much.